been doing benzos for 6 years, and you're like, this is not it. I feel like we're all sitting in a rehab trying to watch the impeachment trial. We're like, this isn't doing it, and AOC is not doing it, and nobody's doing it for us anymore. And it just feels like wherever you go, especially the media, it feels like they're just in the grips of like, it's like they're in first year sobriety, which is just, it's a very boring and place to be, where it's the first year you're sober, you're just kind of uncertain and you're making mountains out of molehills. But I mean, do you think they eventually adjust, or are they going to keep dialing things up to 11? I mean, nothing's going to be Trump, though.
Well, I think they're going to ride out the dog and pony show that is the impeachment trial.
Right.
I mean, I think that that's a purely like cynical, functional decision to proceed with the Senate trial that nobody wants or needs. It's like total. I mean, it creates a lot of make work for these politicians who don't want to do any real work and who want to continue playing hot potato with responsibility, opposing their own liability, accountability, and passing it on to the next guy kind of infinitely. And also, it is great for the media cycle. These people, I mean, the media is like a bunch of like disgruntled adolescents who daddy paid their allowance, and now that daddy's gone, like, what are they going to do? They hate him. They hate dad. I think, but like,
yeah, you quoted me once as saying like people are talking about journalists. There's like no journalists. There's like 7 journalists. Like then everybody else is like just whatever, a culture commentator, whatever you want to call them. But like nobody's doing like the actual shoe leather reporting and like putting themselves at risk and taking these major risks and breaking. They're not embedding themselves with anything. These are it's pretty basic. Type of like, fear mongering from whichever side, and they just do it all on Twitter. I mean, everything can be done remotely now. Everything is Zoom. It's like a Zoom.
Yeah.
It's like they're embedding themselves into. Taylor Lorenz, who writes for the New York Times, just sits on Clubhouse every night waiting for one of us to say the word retard, and I say it every 2 minutes, and no one cares because I'm not famous, but she's waiting for. I'm more famous than her. But she's
don't lowball yourself.
I mean, compared to her, I mean, whatever. She writes about mukbangs. Kidding, Taylor. We know you listen. But she's in the Clubhouse rooms waiting for like a CEO to just say something misogynistic, and then she writes an article about it. And it's like, that's not a journalist. A journalist should be someone who like moves to Dallas, Texas, and writes about the Kennedy assassination for 5 years, doesn't finish a book, and ends up killing themselves.
Yeah.
That's true.
And the only person I can think of now who basically occupies that role is like Michael Tracy. He's like the sexiest, People magazine's sexiest man alive. He's like the most hated guy on the internet. People really hate him. There's like 3 journalists, him, Greenwald, and Taibbi, that don't belong in prison.
Right.
The rest of them are like, they're professional aggregators. They're bloggers, or they're like, like I said this on the last episode of my pod, they're like basically stenographers for liberal consensus, you know?
Well, they could you know what it is? You know how it's not good? Because you could easily take any of those journalists and put them in the writer's room at Saturday Night Live, and they'd fit in.
Yeah.
It would be like fine. Like they could easily just go in and like write a sketch about Putin coming down the chimney and like hooking up with Trump or whatever high-level satire that $1 trillion operation over there is offering. Sleep is so important, especially for your immune system, okay? And you have a Helix mattress, and it's amazing.
They were compelled to read Marx in school, and they came here so I would never have to read Marx again.
Right. That's why I'm going to leave America, because we're going to be compelled to read Chelsea Handler very soon. So just to give you an idea of the...
You're going to be compelled to read like Ibrahim Kendi or whatever, or Robin DiAngelo. Yeah. What do I like in culture? God, that's a good question. I like Adam Curtis. He has a new documentary series coming out.
Hypernormalization was great. That's great.
He has a new one. He has a new one. But that man speaks to me on all levels, like intellectual, aesthetic, like conceptual. And he has like a very kind of like mischievous worldview, in that like he's a classic Gemini, much like Trump, Kanye, Azalea Banks. All the great artists of our time are Geminis. My mother's a Gemini.
Right.
So he has this kind of like what are you, by the way?
I'm an Aquarius.
Okay.
I don't know anything
about.
I don't know what that means. I think it just means that you're full of shit. which I think is a good description of me.
I think it might mean that you're chaotic.
Yeah, that's possible. It's a water sign. I don't know what that means, but I think it just means that you're like, I think a lot of people in sales are Aquarius. A lot of people in art or people that talk for a living are Aquarius. Things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but basically, he has, this wonderful vision that is kind of fairly bleak, but also not miserable. He's not a miserable.
Yes.
And I like those aspects of culture that aren't like that are serious but not miserable. And I do like the Real Housewives franchises because they basically are, an interesting kind of like sociological view into like gender dynamics and class dynamics.
The best,
sort of thing.
If anyone wants to understand the mortgage crisis, I mean, there's a lot of great books. Obviously, Bethany McLean wrote a book called All the Devils Are Here. She's the reporter that broke the Enron story. But really, other than her, if you're not going to read her entire book, the first season of The Real Housewives of Orange County is probably the best depiction of the financial crisis, where literally people that were, I mean, not to be unkind, but, developmentally disabled, many of these women, had owned 3 or 4 homes, and many of the men they were with, again, had sports injuries, neurological problems, autoimmune diseases. I mean, people that truly could barely get from their Range Rover to their doorstep without 5 pills, somehow were running real estate empires, and someone somewhere had to say this is going to come crashing down, and it did. But there's been no better depiction of that crash culturally than Gina Kehoe, who was a fat realtor who used to be a Playboy bunny, and her brain-damaged husband, Matt, who used to...
conservative daughter.
Her conservative daughter. Her brain-damaged husband, Matt. They're trying to get the kid to play baseball, and she goes, we bought 3 houses. Each of the kids have a house, and you go, oh, this isn't going to work.
No.
And but that culturally, that was like spot on. You say socialism is dead, so what's next?
I don't know, fascism. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps.
Tim, I hate all these labels. I think they're all so fake and gay.
I know they are gay and fake. Yeah, I mean, perhaps.
Tim, I hate all these labels. I think they're all so fake and gay. I listened to the episode you did with Candace Owens, right?
Yes.
And
by the way, and I've never said this, but since you said you want to come out and say something, I'll say something. I am the father of her child. I'm the father of Candace's. Decided to father a child with her.
That must be great for your career.
Well, it was harder than I thought. I mean, I've done it a few times with women. I've had sex with women. None of them would say it was great, but they were all preceded by 5-course dinners and carriage rides to the park. So, I mean, really, it's the whole package.
You're not a what's it called? A gold star gay? Is that what it's called?
Yes, one who's never gone near a woman. No, there's several Long Island women who've, had the privilege of being near me. What up? So you listen what did you think about that episode? Because people got mad at me that I didn't scream at her or something.
I mean, I don't know. She's really cute and smart. I like her. She's zippy and peppy. She reminds me of Black Paglia. She has the same energy.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't want to say she's Camille Paglia. I think we might have to slow down with that. But I do like the energy. I do like the energy. She's peppy.
I mean, like in her like vibe and her general energy. I think she has like the same kind of energy, but I think like the thing that she gets wrong and that a lot of people on the right get wrong fundamentally is they talk about like radical leftism, and this isn't radical leftism, it's just liberalism. Right. Like all the radical leftists are just liberals.
Right.
This is the extreme, this is the logical conclusion, logical extreme of taking like the individual centric human rights based framework and bringing it to like this extreme conclusion. You have like the the war on gender, the war on the family, like all of these things that we didn't think would be a thing. This is just I think it's very tactical also on the part of like the liberal establishment. And a lot of people on the right want to see it as like a kind of radical left phenomenon, and it's really not. I don't think there is any meaningful socialism or leftism in the United States of America.
No, there doesn't seem to be much, and you know, obviously they're all these things are all, you know, unfortunate terms, but you know, in terms of the most aggressively liberal people are also very much careerists in a very boring office. They love office politics. They love, you know, these meaningless awards they give to each other. They love committees. They love nonsense. There's something very sexless and sad about that particular iteration of liberalism, that culture, even though they're hyper obsessed with sex and sexual freedom. No one seems like they're having it. It seems like a very strange, churlish kind of, hyper focused on career. I mean, everybody's got the attitude of like, somebody that wants to be the CEO of the public space. That's what it feels like. Everybody just wants to own a certain, has certain turf, and this is where I stand, and just fucking, sling my half-baked ideas. And as a comic, it's just watching comedians become this has been sort of sad, because I knew a lot of these people, or I had, had limited interactions with them, but I had appreciated some of their work. And like, Chelsea Handler used to write some really funny books about her pussy, and they were funny. And, she used to write, about shitting herself and whatever, having sex with midgets or whatever it was. And now she's doing documentaries about white privilege. And I feel like it's hard to see that change. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with Jimmy Kimmel saying that the people trading GameStop stock are Russians. I don't know why he's doing that. I don't know what it does for him. I don't understand.
I mean, some of them probably are. I mean, I think just like you ignore it and you do your own thing, because I think there's enough of like an extra institutional population of people that they have, like somebody like Joe Rogan, right, has way more influence than any of these people, and they know it, which is why they're always trying to like get him branded as like a fascist or a white supremacist or a transphobe or whatever.
Right.
But and another thing, that she said on that episode was like right, that like leftism is a religious cult for people who wake up in the morning wanting to get outraged or at something, who make themselves like deliberately unattractive, like this sort of thing. And really what they're doing in her mind was that they were sort of like they want to I forgot how she put it. I wrote it down somewhere. I don't know if I could find it.
She was basically saying she enjoys her life, and that people want her to be enraged, and she goes to the grocery store and she sees, oh, what do they have in the meat aisle? And people are like mad at Aunt Jemima pancakes.
Yeah, the pancakes, right. And she said, their mission is to undo things that people historically never had a problem with or thought even to have a problem with. And, spot the lie. Like, she's not wrong, but that's fundamentally even too charitable, because what they're really doing, I think, is so much worse, which is taking credit for fighting these kind of simpler battles of the past that have already been meaningfully settled far in advance by forces outside of their control, mainly economic forces and economic processes, So they want to take credit for like accelerating certain battles, like the battle, like all this like gender discourse, trans rights and stuff like that. And basically those things were already kind of like economically baked in the cake, that people would become kind of less gender binary as women enter the workforce.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. So many of these forces are, like you said, brilliantly out of people's control. They're not exactly malleable. They seem to be sort of static forces that just shape the culture in different ways. And that manifests in different ways. Some of those ways are incredibly annoying, some less so. You talked about Me Too. You said something very interesting, that Me Too was kind of going to be used as the precursor for a lot of social control, a lot of compliance. This idea that we want, people that are not asking too many questions or complying. And I'm sure people don't get a little angry with you for that stuff on Twitter. People get a little angry for you. Paglia always brings up the great point that men and women had worked separately for hundreds of years, for all of history. And like men and women working together all the time in the proximity they are is a relatively new phenomenon. And some of the things that come up are, somewhat understandable. Go into the Me Too as a precursor for compliance. I think that's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the trick is that, again, like all of these things were already made kind of economically unviable. I think like my gloss on Me Too is fairly kind of like cynical and unforgiving. I think like the kind of tiny brain read was that it was a justice movement. The mid-brain read was that it was a revenge movement, which, by the way, the most kind of intelligent and sophisticated advocates of Me Too acknowledged we're just getting revenge on men, and we're playing by their rules. The third tier kind of large brain take was that this was a labor movement, that it was a changing of the guard. They were sweeping out the old guard and replacing it with new blood, i.e. women and minorities. And then, for me, there's like this fourth tier that's like the galaxy brain take, that this is kind of a psychologically motivated, it's a psychosexual movement, which I'm like doing my greatest hits. I've said this like a million times, but women think they're mad at men because they're hostile and aggressive, and they're really mad at men because they're ineffectual and indifferent. Because men and women, for the same spots in the workplace, men now view women as economic and professional rivals. So there's this like weird kind of psychosexual pulsion. There is like Me Too does feel very often like a provocation to men to take the bait, which they won't, because for various reasons they're demoralized and non-productive or whatever. But I think more than that, my biggest fear with Me Too had nothing to do with sex or gender. It had to do with the fact, like right away, like, I feel like I clocked it. It had to do with the fact that it was a kind of dry run, a dress rehearsal for the broader erosion of due process that we're seeing right now across professional spheres, especially like in tech and in media. So, people getting fired, dismissed, like canceled, whatever, this sort of thing. And I think like it was very, again, I don't know if it was like conscious, but it was very tactical, because Me Too is appealing for a host of reasons, mainly because you cannot argue with a victim or else you're an unreasonable monster, right?
Right.
You can't argue with like its general slogan of believe women, because if you problematize, if you call into question that slogan, it must mean that you don't believe women, and then what kind of a person are you?
I also have a problem with who society claims are victims. I quote tweeted David Hogg today because he's now coming up with a new pillow, because the My Pillow guy is, I don't know, alt-right. He's making an alt-right pillow. So David Hogg's now trying to make a progressive pillow. And I just don't. Yeah, have you heard about the David Hogg, the Parkland kid?
David Hogg is one of those crisis actors. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, he is. He's a mealy mouth. He is making a progressive pillow. But here's the thing: I don't think any of these kids are victims. I would have loved to be in a school shooting and survived. I don't know that that's I mean, think about that. To be in a school shooting and to have survived. Are you a victim after? You're a victim during it, but when you come out the other side, are you still a victim? This is the last week of our YouTube channel, Ben. Thank God we were in Texas, because this will be the last week of our YouTube channel. But that's a great point. You can't argue with certain people. What kind of mom are you gonna be? Are you gonna be a tiger mom? Are you gonna be like a helicopter parent? Or are you just gonna let your kid wander around the Lower East Side and figure it out? Have you decided?
Yeah,